Hey there guys, here we are in doing our set review videos for Innistrad Midnight Hunt, and this is the last one for this set, part 4, multicolour and colours. Actually, I don't really think set review is quite the right word to describe what I do, but I just want to quickly say this. I will change the name from set review to being the best cards for EDH, basically, because that's more of what this is doing. It's like looking at a whole bunch of cards that I think these could be good for EDH and what are the best ones, and usually you're talking about the mythics and whatnot when you're talking about that, but still, anyway, I wanted to just say that I will change it. I think I should have maybe changed it already, but, that's a better way to explain what I'm doing. I'm not really reviewing the entire set as such. I'm just looking... Well, I am reviewing the set, but I am just looking for those few cards, those few handfuls of cards that are just these are the best cards from, the non-legendaries that can go into your 99s and whatnot and things like that. So I think that would be a better name for it. But anyway, we better get right on into the video for today because there's a lot to talk about, so we better get right on into it. And we're going to start talking about some multicolour cards. By the way, we make lots of great content here on the channel. And if you haven't already, please think about subscribing to the channel. It really helps out the channel grow and make more great content for you. And as our analytics show, 95.6% of people aren't subscribed to the channel. So if you aren't subscribed to the channel, do please think about subscribing to the channel. Alright, so first I want to talk about Blade Stitched Scab. 2 mana Dimir zombie soldier. Other zombies you control get +1/+0. Yeah, sure. It's just fine for blue-black zombies or blue-black X zombies. There are only so many zombie decks that are blue-black X or whatever, blue-black Y. But if you need another zombie lord or pseudo-lord, he is only 2 mana, and there are a lot of graveyard shenanigans and synergies, so if he dies, you're not going to care that much because you probably get him back and do some other stuff. Maybe there's some stuff in certain decks that are not super zombie tribal, whatever his name is, the Dimir one from Amonkhet or whatever his name is, not Scarab God, or is it Scarab God? It's one of the gods. Anyway, the blue-black god, I can't think of his actual name now. I think it is Scarab God, but whatever. He makes everything a zombie from when he recurs stuff and whatnot. That's not strictly zombie tribal. So if you have some pseudo-zombies or things that get made into zombies because of other effects that are in your deck, you might want to run something like this. It's not the greatest or the most powerful, but it is okay. If you're in that aggro, I'm going to attack sort of style of a deck, or sometimes that can be really relevant. Again, it's just oh, okay, I just so happen to have made 50 something zombies, and 1 extra power of attack isn't too bad. And then when you have this as a embalmed or zombie from your Scarab God or whatever, it's a 4/4, so that's pretty good, as well. So yeah, I would think about it if you're heavy on zombies, but otherwise, no, I don't really think it'll see much play. Can't Stay Away is interesting. 2 mana sorcery. You basically return a creature with CMC or mana value of 3 or less to the battlefield, but if it dies, it exiles it. And it does have flashback. The only reason I'm sort of talking about it is because it has that flashback. So if it gets into your graveyard somehow, you can get something out of your graveyard to sort of if you've gotten stuck or gotten board wiped or whatever, need to get back in the game, be like, oh, okay, well, I'll just cast this for its flashback. I like flashback cards like this because it's being able to basically get you back in the game a lot of the times when you are behind. though I don't think it's the most effective like card. There's so many like really good reanimation spells, but this one is another one. So maybe some people will look at playing it in some decks. Depends what you're doing. Like there are some commanders that I could see maybe it going in, like Carador and things like that. Mostly you want to be creatures in Carador, but when you mill this over and then you get to bring something back that's 3 or less, you just bring your Eternal Witness back or whatever. Yes, you'll have to exile it or whatever if it dies, but you know, you do other things with it or whatever, you don't really care. You get back something else you really need from your graveyard, or the thing that basically recurs your whole graveyard, and then you don't really care because then you're just like getting everything back. So it's just like, well, you know, it's well worth it in the long run in certain decks to have something like this. So I would think about it. I don't think Dire Strain Rampage is actually a removal spell. This is one of the things about this spell. I think it's a weird ramp spell, okay? You basically sacrifice one of your lands, Harrow style, and then you get 2 lands for yourself in a Gruul deck. Like, you don't really care about the other stuff. Like, once in a blue moon, you're going to be like, oh, well, I really, really, really need to destroy my opponent's artifact, enchantment, or whatever. Or I just have, you know, maybe if you have a useless artifact or a useless enchantment, sometimes it comes up or whatnot. Or if you've got somebody who's playing Zedru or something else like that where they're donating their stuff to you and you want to get rid of it, sometimes that can be relevant. It's not going to come up a lot, but again, sometimes it will. And since you are controlling it or it's on you or whatever, it's one of those things where you get the advantage of it. So it's one of those things where you want to sacrifice most of your own stuff, like mostly lands. Like, again, don't worry about the artifact enchantment unless you're playing someone who's playing like Zedru or whatever. So then you actually have an artifact or enchantment that you can probably destroy or get rid of. But then in a pinch, it's just a sorcery removal spell. And like at that point when you're like, it's mostly for utility and for the fact that it's a Harrow in my deck or whatever, then it's kind of like, well, it doesn't really matter as much because I'm using it as a bad Harrow, and then it has the upside of destroying an artifact or enchantment my opponent controls. Downside is they get a land. Upside is it also has flashback, which is also kind of nice. So it's okay. It's not the most amazing ever, but it's certainly interesting for some decks, and I would just put it in decks to give yourself some extra possible removal and some extra possible like ramp. At certain points it's just like, oh, okay, I don't really need my 9th or 10th ramp spell when I draw it late in the game. Now it's just a destroy artifact or enchantment spell. Not super exciting, the sorcery, but yeah, sure, fine. It will take the fact that this is a sorcery ramp and maybe sorcery and removal if we 100% have to. I think Diagraph Rebirth is quite interesting for certain decks. You do really have to be able to sacrifice creatures though. So it's 3 and black-green. It costs 1 less to cast for each creature that died this turn. You return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. It also has flashback of 5 and green-black. So again, the flashback will also, you know, count towards that number of creatures that died. So you can just cast this almost always for green-black to return a creature from your graveyard to the battlefield. Now, it is a spell in your mostly wanting to be creature decks like Baron and things like this and Muldrotha and whatnot. So it is a hard sort of card to like fit in there somewhere because you need so many different things in your Muldrotha or whatnot decks to make it, or Baron decks to make the function. But the thing is, I think it's still really good. 2 mana to reanimate anything, especially when you're trying to set up these, you know, sort of loops of, you know, sacrificing stuff to ping everyone for life and whatnot and all this sort of stuff, and make tokens to ping for even more life and things like that. Can be really good with like Nadir and things like that. So, you know, there are really good synergy pieces around it, and the flashback on it is quite nice. So I think some decks could run it. I think it's quite interesting. I think Fateful Mending is okay. I mean, Faithless Looting is basically the same. It's basically Faithless Looting, and you know, Faithless Looting is played a little bit, not a huge, great deal. But again, you know, just another card, and it goes into blue-white. So that's interesting. It does gain you 2 life. If that's ever relevant, probably not ever going to be. But if you have some life gain synergies, maybe that'll be relevant once in a blue moon. But I think it's mostly just another card that could go into blue-white. But you've already got a lot of card draw in blue, so I don't know how good this is. But it can replace some other things that are out there, certainly, because they're not as like aggressively costed as far as being 2 mana. You do have to discard those cards, so you might want to think about running some like more flashback or more whatever it is, whatever the other not Dominaria, whatever it was, Ravnica manufacturing, yeah, whatever it was. Jumpstart, that was what it was, I think, Jumpstart or whatever. That you sort of can flash back spells and whatnot, things like that. So you want to care about spells or permanents or whatever you're putting in your graveyard, unless it's lands, of course, because you've drawn 20-something lands, then it's like, well, I don't really care. But yeah, like you still mostly want to care about whatever you're putting into your graveyard, because you don't want to just put stuff in there to be like, oh, well, I hope I don't need that at some point during this game. You always want to have access to your cards. So I would think about it if you're in that deck and you do need things or do want things sometimes in your graveyard and whatnot. So yeah, I think it's pretty good. I think Galvanic Generation is just another, like, makes your next spell, you know, copy. It's just fine. There are some decks that might want it, but there are already so many, you know, you may copy your spell. It does have flashback, which is kind of nice, but there are a few of those spells as well that already have flashback that do the same thing. Having another one, yeah, fine, sure, and some decks will be happy to run it. So yeah, I can see some place for it in certain spell slinger decks. Ghoulcaller's Harvest is actually quite good, I think. 2 mana, you create X 2/2 black zombie creature tokens with Decayed, where X is half the number of creature cards in your graveyard rounded up. It also has flashback for 3 and double black. So, you know, if you have a huge graveyard, you're just going to make a huge amount of tokens. Yes, they have Decayed, but still, like, you could do something with them, especially if you're in a sacrifice deck or whatnot, or if you're in those sorts of decks. It's like, oh, yes, I get all of these bodies, then I can do something else with them and do all this other stuff. And there's so many little things that you can do that I think, you know, it's one of those things. You're counting, you know, the things that you can do with it more than you can, like, count the number of things that, oh, well, doesn't work with this. But yeah, again, it is a spell in your mostly creature carrying deck, so that is a little bit irksome, but it is just 2 mana for the front side at least. And the flashback, again, if it gets milled or whatever discarded, you know, you've got that second buyback sort of effect. So I still think it can see some play in some decks. I think Rite of Harmony, like Glimpse of Nature, like, you know, 2 mana instant whenever you creature or enchantment ETB is under your control. This turn you draw a card, also has flashback for 2 and green-white. So yeah, if you're like looking for a spell in your creature slash enchantment deck, maybe, sure, especially if you're in a token deck where not a lot of the stuff really cares about the smaller stuff that you're like playing from playing lands and things like this. So I definitely can see places for it. It's hard to like look at it and be like, well, it doesn't do anything or whatnot. But you know, it's Glimpse of Nature. You don't see it played that much. Sometimes in Elf Ball decks you do, but yeah, maybe I could see some people playing it. I'd actually have to glimpse of nature into my squirrel deck. I don't know, but this is quite good anyway. But still, I think see playing some decks, especially for focus on tokens. I was just looking into fairy, and I'm not sure. I don't know. It's hard for me to put it into a place, but mostly like blue-white control. So I don't know. It's not that huge of an effect. You for 4 mana, you get a 4 loyalty planeswalker. He's 2 and white blue. You choose up to 1 target artifact, creature, and land. Untap the permanents you control. Tap the permanents you don't control. You gain 2 life as the +1 tick up. Like, it's again stacking your opponents and helping your own stuff. Like, if you ramp with this, or sort of pseudo ramp with this, making it cost less, yeah, okay, sure, you got ahead, or you can put your opponents behind so that they, can't really attack you, or they can't really do much to you. But when you tap the permanents that your opponents control, they will untap during their next turn. So it doesn't really do that much, it's hard to think that it won't be that good, because the ultimate is pretty good. It's not the most amazing, not most game winning effect ever, but still it's pretty good. But anyway, neg 2, look at the top 3 cards of your library, put one of them into your hand, the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. So scry 3, draw 1 essentially, or draw one of them. That's okay, not amazing, not great. The problem with this is it doesn't protect itself. But in Planeswalker decks, maybe you could see this being played, because the emblem, the ultimate, to get to the emblem, -7, you get an emblem with untap permanents you control during each opponent's untap step, and you draw a card during each opponent's draw step. That is pretty darn good if you can get there, because the amount of card advantage that you're going to get every single turn is going to start mounting up and mounting up and mounting up. And if you're playing that blue-white control stacks, whatever style deck, yeah, there might be better cards again. So I don't really know. But again, it's still really, really good to have open mana and draw extra cards, because that's what those sort of decks want to do. Maybe it's not really for our format 100%. Maybe it's a more CDH thing, but then again, it's kind of it's probably not powerful enough for CDH, so it's finds itself in this really weird place where it might not see that much play. Definitely might see play in Super Friends style decks, but other than that, I don't really see it seeing a big impact. But it's certainly at least an interesting card for certain decks, I think. I want to talk about Vampire Socialite. Rakdos mana for a Vampire Noble 2/2 has Menace. When it enters the battlefield, if an opponent lost life this turn, you put a +1/+1 counter on each vampire you control. As long as an opponent lost life this turn, each other vampire you control enters the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter on it. So it gives you those benefits whether it's entering or whether it's already entered, and that's pretty darn good for a vampire deck. So it really only goes in vampire decks. We're waiting to see what new vampire commanders we're going to get in the new set. There's been a couple in this set, but I think they've been mostly middle of the road for the most part. Not that amazing. Mostly werewolves and wolves and humans and angels and different things like that. So not very many vampires. The only vampire was Florin. And I don't think Florin's that amazing. I think he's okay. I think he's pretty interesting, but I don't think he's that powerful. Certainly not like Edgar Markov was, but you don't need something that powerful. You just need something that cares about vampires a lot more than what Florin does. And since what's his name here? Vampire Socialite is the legendary. It just can't really be your commander, so it would have been a good commander if it had, or whatever, if it had been legendary, you know, because then you can get this from your command zone every single turn, so that's pretty darn good. But anyway, I think that's pretty much it for multicolor stuff that I want to talk about now, so let's move on quickly to having a look at colorless stuff and artifacts. Alright, after having a quick look here at the colorless and artifact stuff, there isn't much to talk about. Only really the Solitist is here. It's not that amazing because I don't think 3 mana rocks are that amazing, but it does come up with some nice upsides. But for the most part, unless you're like in a werewolf deck, I don't really think it's that relevant because it's turning day to night, and werewolf decks are going to be in green-red, so you don't really need mana rocks in that deck. You maybe want Sol Ring, and that might be it, or the Great Henge. But the Great Henge is more card draw and card advantage and whatnot, things like that, than it being like about, you know, mana or whatnot. It's mostly card draw, so yeah, but I don't think otherwise this can see much play. There's not that many like day-night commanders or whatnot, so it's only a werewolf card. So that is pretty much it for this set and what's happening with all of the cards in the set. It's an interesting set to have a look at and whatnot. And I hope you guys have enjoyed like having a look through the set. There's certainly some okay reprints, not like the most amazing reprints in the set and whatnot. But now we've had a look at everything from the set and, you know, talked about most of the more important sort of stuff from the set and whatnot for EDH. You know, I want to know what you guys have to think about, you know, the cards that are in the set. I always want to know what you guys have to think about some of the cards from the set. I get some nice Discord messages from people sometimes about some of the cards when I do these things and things like this. You know, and again, this will be available as a podcast as well soon as I can get it together and whatnot. Yeah, but again, anyway, you guys let me know what you think of all of these cards as I'm scrolling through some of them. Somewhat quickly though, because I think we've seen most of them. As I say, I'm just sort of scrolling through for the most part to like make sure I haven't missed anything for the most part. I do love the full art basics though from this set. I actually saw some of the full art dual lands from the set as well come out of the pack more recently, and they were very lovely as well. Like the artwork on some of these sites and whatnot doesn't really do like what you actually get in person justice. So that is one of those things. You know, like what do you think of the new double face cards and whatnot? Tell me what you think about this set in whole. Are you more interested in Crimson Vow than Midnight Hunt? I think I'm more interested in Crimson Vow, to be honest, because even though I'm not interested in vampires, I think that set will be a little bit more open-ended, you know, and whatnot for the most part, because it'll have more things going for it for the most part, whereas this set, I think, you know, won't really have that much going for it in terms of like more like broad sort of cards. Like there's mostly like werewolves and humans in this set and whatnot, so there's some zombies, there's some other like hints of some of the other stuff, but it's mostly like one half of the set and we're waiting for the next half. So certainly I'll be getting onto it as soon as that set is like fully spoiled and fully like coming out and whatnot, which will be a few weeks. They have had to delay it and whatnot for shipping reasons and whatnot, but when that does happen, I'll be right on it. So be sure to join me then for another have a set review essentially, but I'm not going to call them that essentially anymore, but they are set reviews. We're just looking at the best cards for Commander. That's all we're doing really. So, but anyway, guys, thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you again. Hey, you've just finished watching one of our videos. A bunch of other videos are popping up on your screen now for you to check out, so why not check them out?